Production support for In Focus is provided by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity for Central and Southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com, and by viewers like you. Thank you.
Members of the deaf community have long debated whether deaf children should use medical devices to help them hear and be integrated into the hearing culture, or whether they should be enrolled in schools that provide a more specialized education and promote the use of sign language. That debate has come to a head as the state begins pulling resources away from the Indiana School for the Deaf and transferring them to a new center it will develop for deaf and hard of hearing education. We'll take a look at the potential benefits and costs of the move as we put deaf education in focus. Good evening, I'm Stan Jastrzebski. For years, the Indiana School for the Deaf, or ISD, was the sole state provider of counseling services for families with deaf and hard of hearing children. A new law changes that by moving those services out of the school and into an independent center. But as WTIU's Gretchen Frazee reports, the move has also stirred a debate about the message the state is sending to parents of deaf children.
The author of the bill says it makes more sense to separate Indiana's deaf services from the School for the Deaf, which teaches primarily in sign language. Representative Cindy Noe says the state created a problem for itself when it put outreach services under the watch of ISD.
We had them actually joined at the hip through a common board with a provider, the deaf school. And that really is a conflict of interest when you have the overall conforming group having a special relationship with one of the providers.
Some people who support the law have alleged the Indiana School for the Deaf advocates too heavily for sign language and does not do enough to incorporate children into the hearing community. Josh Wade's son Nathan has a cochlear implant, a device that stimulates nerves in the inner ear, allowing deaf individuals to hear. Wade says when he went in for counseling, ISD presented few alternatives to teaching Nathan sign language. He says he thinks the debate over the law centers around the fact that people are still getting used to new medical devices like cochlear implants.
We have a new technology, and there's starting to become an academic base for that technology, and the choices need to be represented equally. And I think that's all this was about.
But Amy Cornwell, a professor at Indiana University's Department of Speech and Hearing Sciences, says sign language should not be abandoned.
They don't live with that implant on all the time. I mean, there's an implant, but there's a device that goes on the outside that is taken off. I mean, you take a bath, it's not on. You go swimming, it's not on. You're involved in sports, it's not on. All that time, they then have nothing that they can hear. So why not do something visually that they can see?
Representative Noe says the process of creating the new center will be a long one, but she's still confident it was the right decision.
I believe in our heart of hearts, this is an opportunity to, leave some bags at the door and to come in and really have that focus of how can we best serve the parents of and the children who are deaf and hard of hearing.
Stakeholders are meeting regularly to lay out the details of the transition and will later select the people who will head the center.
And we're joined in studio tonight by three guests. They are Greg Catter, the father of two children who attend the Indiana School for the Deaf. Also, Naomi Horton, the executive director of Hear Indiana, an organization that advocates helping deaf children learn to hear and to speak. And State Senator Pete Miller, who formerly worked with the Indiana Office of Management and Budget, which was charged in part with implementing the new law. Thanks to the three of you for being here. I actually want to start by going to a piece of sound, Greg, we collected from your daughter, Margaret, about her feelings about deaf education. That's going to get us off and running.
Okay. I can't speak for everybody, but most people don't care what kind of method you use to communicate. They just know that they have a similar, not disability, but situation as you, that they can connect with you easier. And that's how the deaf culture is for me, that I feel that somebody else understands how I live and how I can't hear sometimes, other than if I just join the hearing culture, they talk about stuff and I don't understand or I can't hear them. And they understand, but they can't connect with me the same way deaf culture can.
So we just heard her say that she feels there's a disconnect between the hearing culture and the deaf culture. And Greg, we'll start with you and we'll go down the panel. I want to start with sort of a general question, which is this a problem which has to be overcome, or is it more a situation that needs to be adapted to?
Well, what my daughter was speaking there was that she is a split placement child. She spends part of her time in the public school and part of her time at the Indiana School for the Deaf, and she was drawing the contrast between her experience at the different schools. At the Indiana School for the Deaf, where the language of instruction is American Sign Language, which she's fluent in, it's a very natural environment. There are peers around her who are going through the same experiences. Whereas at the public school, like any kid who's using assistive devices, whether it be a hearing aid or a cochlear implant or FM system amplification at the public schools, they all have the same difficulties where they don't hear everything. And so she was expressing the difficulties that even at the public school, there are things that she doesn't have full access to the way she does at the Indiana School for the Deaf.
Naomi, your thoughts?
Well, I think your question is asking, like, we're here at 2012, so is this something we just need to adapt to this new technology? And I think that's what we're seeing. The children that you saw in the video, that child getting his implant mapped or tuned up and programmed, is one of the first group of children who was benefited by universal newborn hearing screening. So that law was passed in 1999 in the state of Indiana. So only those kids who were identified at birth we're just now seeing their outcomes, and their outcomes are fantastic. And so yes, we're now at that stage where parents are having to make a choice and they see children doing really well with the new technology. And so yes, it's something we're adapting to. How do we best educate those children with the new technology that's available?
Pete, as you were going through the discussions on this new law, is this something that you were faced with trying to figure out which is the culture in which some children better fit, hearing culture, deaf culture, a mix of the two?
Yeah, no one size fits all. And I want to make clear that this bill or administration or the legislature is not endorsing one approach over the other. The point was we were recognizing that we as a state didn't do this very well. There were children falling through the cracks, and the point is to acquire language skills, regardless of whether that's English or whether that's American Sign Language. And a child, when they reach first grade, they've got to be able to communicate with that language in order to have a building block to acquire the knowledge they need to acquire throughout school, and we were not doing that very well.
We received a number of questions from our audience prior to the show.
Before we go into that question, I'd like to respond to what Pete was saying about the one of the concerns that the opponents of the bill had was that the bill, it was addressing a problem that had already been addressed. Nowhere in the bill or in the analysis that they discussed the relatively young statewide referral network for deaf and hard of hearing kids, which just started working, I think it was in August. And since that network was in place, the number of people that were identified and received services jumped dramatically. So they had virtually, full participation through that program. So the question arose is, okay, we've largely solved that problem. Why do we need a bill to do something we already have in place?
I would suggest that the network, a very good and well-intentioned attempt to get through the system as is, was only as good as the system was in, and the bill was meant to change the system itself. The scope of that network is dealing with how services are initially provided. The scope of the center will be much larger than just that network. It will be with monitoring and tracking. It will deal with having more of a one-stop shop for all of these services. And like I said, it's nothing against any of the individuals that have worked on this in the past. It's merely an organizational problem at the state, and we're excited to put in place something that will reach all children and serve all children better, not just one or the other.
And we'll address that a little more in a little bit. But as I was saying, we got a number of questions from our audience prior to tonight's show, and I want to get to the first one this evening. This one comes in from Tammy Hostler, who writes, how is the new center going to improve deaf education in public schools or mainstream schools where 80% of deaf and hard of hearing children attend? And Pete, that sounds like it was going to something like what you were just saying. Can you start by answering that?
Well, the monitoring and tracking is not just from the point of identification to getting services. It's from birth to the point where they graduate from high school. So if those students are not achieving their goals that are in their individual education plans, the center will try to ring the alarm bells sooner. Because what happens currently is those kids struggle if they don't have those skills to communicate and have language skills. You hear terrible stories of kids in third, fourth grade that are just in the public schools, and many of them are transferred to the school for the deaf, and you're trying to do all these things at the same time instead of having a more if you can address these problems earlier. So I do see the focus of the center for public schools and at ISD as well.
We have another question that came in from our audience prior to tonight's program that I want to get to right now that kind of jumps off of this. And this second question comes in from Marla Hartrack, who writes, has anyone in the state of Indiana conducted a statewide report on the reading and math outcomes of all K-12 deaf and hard of hearing students? She says, I think that a study of their outcomes should drive the action, not the other way. Naomi, I'm going to put that one to you. What is your thought on the amount of study that's been done? Has there been enough to decide how we should proceed in terms of deaf and hard of hearing education, or does more data need to be gathered before we truly know where we're headed?
There's two answers to that. One is that it's always going to be a parent's decision. So the parents are going to have to look at the data and decide for themselves. And they can make any choice they want. They can go against the data, right? So that's what I want to say before I tell you what the data has shown. So if you look at just the children in the mainstream, about half of them pass their I-STEP. It's a little better in math than it is in reading for kind of obvious reasons. But it's only half, and that's not good enough for me. And I don't think it's good enough for parents. One problem with mainstream education is we don't have track of all of those kids. If you look at the incidence of hearing loss, we should have in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 4,000 students in K through 12. We currently only have about 2,000 that are labeled with an individualized education plan. So we're missing some of them. Some of them are doing so well that they're actually dropped from an IEP, so we are not counting those data in the I-STEP scores. Others may have a mild or unilateral loss and aren't qualifying, although they could be. And then I haven't looked at the most recent I-STEP scores from the Indiana School for the Deaf. Do you have more recent? My memory is to 2010, so I don't know.
I don't have more recent information.
Well, in 2010, about a quarter were passing either math or English, and I believe English was down in about the 15th percentile. Again, ASL is a second language, so there's reasons why they're going to be below on their English scores. But those are data that the parents look at and know. I don't think it's enough. I think this new center is going to do a much better job. We're going to be able to finally track the children. How early did that child get hearing aids? How early did they get intervention? From what modality did they choose? And then we can look in the future and make better decisions for our state based on those outcomes. So this is a whole new world and a mass improvement on what we've had.
Greg, you heard Naomi say it's always going to be a parent's choice. I'm wondering, when you were faced with how to educate your children who now attend ISD, what were the sorts of things that you wanted to know? What were the sorts of things you had to find out in order to determine for yourself how best to educate them?
Before I answer that question, I want to comment a little bit on something Naomi said about the outcomes that the deaf school is achieving right now. One of the unique things, and to the writer's question, has anybody studied the outcomes? Yes, they have. Professor Varney Wilbur up at Purdue University has done some extensive long-term studies on the results of deaf and hard of hearing kids and their education to the extent that she's able to get that information. And one of the surprising, well, not surprising to me, but one of the key findings in her study is that of the students who are exposed to, who use American Sign Language as their language of instruction from an early age, who don't have additional difficulties, learning development, autism, visual difficulties, the students who are exposed to ASL early do very, very well on the I-STEP scores. You know, it's not 25% passing rate. The kids who only have hearing loss as their difficulty, they have 80%, 90% passing rates, perhaps the highest in the state. Now, admittedly, it's a fairly small sample, but they do have outstanding results. Now, as far as my wife and I, how we made the choices, and I told Gretchen this in one of our interviews, if a hard of hearing child was going to be born in the world, our family was probably the ideal place for them to be. My wife was working as a speech-language pathologist at the time. My sister-in-law is an audiologist, and gave us a heads up before we even left the hospital. Hey, this particular dimple by your ear is associated with hearing loss. You might want to check that out. So we eventually had a family newborn hearing screen in the hospital. So, there's a data point beyond, before the law was in place. So we had hearing aids on her by the time she was 8 months old, which aren't covered by insurance the way cochlear implants are. So that's all out-of-pocket expenses for people who choose that route. So we were aware of the deaf school, and we were aware of the outcomes there. Margaret's particular situation is she has autoimmune disorder, so the prognosis for her is someday she will be deaf. We don't know when. Could be tomorrow, could be in 10 years. So we wanted to have a foundation that would allow her best to function in the world. And we didn't, cochlear implants didn't, it was a relatively new technology at the time. We didn't think it was appropriate, and her situation wasn't compatible.
Let me stop you and ask you a question that I'll then put to Pete. There's a concern from some people who wrote in that the new center is going to be biased towards one form of education, or either ASL or mainstreaming kids with cochlear implants, or trying to get them into the hearing culture, as your daughter put it at the beginning of the show, perhaps more quickly than is necessary. Is that a concern that you share, that there's going to be a bias towards one type of education or another?
My concern isn't so much about the center, because I've read a lot of information about the center, and the black and white language on the paper is very much about parent choice, supporting parent choice. My concern goes even back before that to the medical model, where with the newborn hearing screen, which I think is a great thing, identifying kids that need amplification or other intervention to get them auditory input so their brain can start forming connections and learning language is a wonderful thing. The concern I have is the medical model that shuns American Sign Language has the effect of denying deaf and hard of hearing children, regardless of whether choosing hearing aids, no amplification, cochlear implants, true access to a language that they have full access to. The IU professor mentioned that cochlear implants don't work all the time. There's a mapping process. Sensors move in locations. They have to be remapped. And anytime that device isn't on their heads or working 100% of the time, that child has no language. They can't learn. They're not developing brain connections. And all the studies, there isn't any study that shows having two languages is a problem. Students in bilingual households, children growing up here in America, live with Spanish-speaking parents. They learn two languages. There's no confusion. Children grow up in Europe, they learn 6, 7 languages. And it just develops millions of brain connections that can only help the child in their later life.
Pete, let me ask you where the center is in terms of its planning, construction, et cetera, right now. I mean, how close are you to being able to make these substantive decisions which actually will decide how much parent interaction goes into how the children are educated, or how much the state decides this is the plan we're going to follow?
Right, you bet. The law was very specific in requiring the Office of Management and Budget to work with a variety of stakeholders. And we're actually having our first kickoff meeting tomorrow with that group, and we are looking forward to getting their feedback on answering some of these questions, such as how do we ensure independence and information that's provided. We've also hired some consultants, some facilitators from out of state who have not been a part of this bill that will be completely independent and have content expertise as well to help this group find common ground. And just working backwards, we have until October the 1st to have this transition plan in place, and it's exactly what the center will look like and how it will be housed and how many employees it will have, how much it will cost, and all those questions.
I want to paraphrase another question I got from an audience member. The person wrote in wondering how the center's leadership is going to work to make sure that deaf professionals are major stakeholders in this decision-making process, and that those people are not just, in their words, given a quote-unquote token position on the board, but instead are being the ones who are being asked, hey, how does this actually work? How is that going to be?
No, I truly embrace that. And again, speaking from what it has been in the past, state government has just been a silo of different agencies. So you've got the Department of Health, you have Family and Social Services, you have Department of Education, you have the School for the Deaf, all playing a part here, but the parent has to navigate through. And like I said, kids were falling through the cracks, and just kind of depending upon which silo that the parent ended up in is the type of information they receive. And when you're designing, you want to design functionally across those agencies and have all those different players with all those different levels of expertise playing a role in the center. And exactly how we do that, how we institutionalize that independence, we're working on that, but that is definitely the goal.
Naomi, let me ask you, from the position of here, Indiana, are there other states whose models you think the state is following well, or do you think that Indiana is kind of charting its own course that is going down a path that might lead to answering some of these questions and addressing this, what seems to be kind of this tug of war between a couple of different sides?
I think we're more leading the change here. I don't think anyone's set it up quite like that we have. At least after it passed, I got lots of emails from other states saying, hey, we're looking at your bill, this looks good, we want to do it in our state. There's a model in Washington state in which you start, I'm not sure exactly how it's structured funding-wise, but I do know you start in one group with members of the deaf community, members of the medical community, members of the listening and spoken language community, and once you have chosen your methodology, you either can seek services from the Washington School for the Deaf or their oral option program, their listening and spoken language preschool. Still not ideal, right, because there's some kids that actually are in between, but that's one kind of model that has seemed to work for Washington. So really think most people are looking at us to see how we're going to do it.
Let me ask you, and Greg, I want to follow up with you on the same question, which is, we've talked a lot about how parental involvement is of the utmost importance here. At the same time, one of the problems that Dr. Bennett has mentioned multiple times in speeches since he's been in office is parents in the state of Indiana are not involved enough in their children's education, and in many cases so uninvolved that they don't know which end is up. They don't know what the right thing to do is for their children. They do not have enough information to make that choice in an informed manner. Again, Naomi, then Greg, is that the case in deaf education? Do parents understand enough what they need to do to give their children the best possible outcome?
Not until they get the education, no. I mean, I think 95% of children that are deaf or hard of hearing are born to hearing parents, and many of them have never met a deaf person in their lives. So they start with a blank slate. And then depending on their connectivity, their income status, their education levels, some of them have access to the best ENT in the state, some of them have access to the internet, some of them don't. And that's what I was finding when I was a provider in First Steps. I was very frustrated with the systems because families were not finding out the information they wanted in both directions. You know, some of them would find about cochlear implant but had never visited the Indiana School for the Deaf and never knew what the choice they were making. So we need to make sure that we're giving that information and we're giving it to people in a level that they can understand. Monolingual Spanish-speaking families need to have access to that information. So yeah, I think it's a problem.
Greg?
The Indiana School for the Deaf has the same spectrum of parent involvement that other schools have, and it is a difficulty. You know, a child, regardless of their hearing situation, that has a parent involved doing their homework is going to do better than a child who doesn't, and that's just how it is. Going back to the previous question about, you know, has anybody else done this? The state of Oklahoma, either 5 years or 10 years ago, the person that told me about this wasn't entirely sure, did implement a Center for Deaf and Hard of Hearing Education similar to the one that we're proposing here in Indiana. And either 5 years or 10 years out, what Oklahoma is seeing is actually a decrease in the performance of the deaf and hard of hearing kids in schools because they are going to more of a medical oral only model instead of using a bilingual sign language approach to help the child learn both a language of instruction, American Sign Language, as a foundation to learn English, spoken English, speech therapy, and other options.
Pete, let me ask you, and then I'll come back to Greg too. When the center is finally up and running, and you mentioned you've got an October 1st deadline that you're working towards, do you see the center as a competitor to ISD, a replacement for it, or an addition to it?
Yeah, in addition, for sure. And when we talk about services that are provided at ISD currently, the School for the Deaf will continue to work with children in pre-K, and it's it's not a matter of taking resources away. We talked in that clip before about a conflict. If you are providing information and you are also a service provider, it's a bit of a conflict. And so all we're doing is separating the piece prior to that parent making that choice of what direction to go and what services to provide. Those will be handled by the center, and once that choice is made, the center will still be involved in terms of the tracking and so forth, but then the services in terms of training parents of how to work with their children and so forth could be provided by a multitude of providers, and the deaf school would be one of them.
Is that how you view it, Greg?
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned separating the providers of services from the people helping shepherd them through. It's noteworthy that the vast majority of the individuals who are to be on the committee, particularly on the elite planning committee, the 8 people who are actually putting together the details of the center, a lot of them, Ms. Horton included, stand to, well, thank you for the correction. A lot of them do stand to benefit greatly from having more people and possibly more state funding funneled to their organizations.
Real quick, in just our last 60 seconds or so, I'd like to get a quick thought, 10-15 seconds from each of you. If you could change one thing about how this process moves going forward, what would it be? Greg, we'll start with you.
Greater involvement from people in the deaf community who have an interest in making sure their voices are heard.
Okay, Naomi?
I think we need to recognize that oral deaf education 40 years ago was a mess, and there were bad things that happened to deaf people in that situation. But that oral deaf education today is no longer child abuse, that these kids can listen, they can play piano, they can sing. So we need to put behind us what has happened and recognize it and honor it, but move on together for the best interest of the families.
All right, and Pete?
Yeah, one thing I think that is happening just as a result of shows like this and the attention that's paid to the bill is we are raising the profile of this issue and making parents and families aware of the resources that are available to them, and they don't feel like they're just on their own having to navigate the system.
All right, well, my thanks to all 3 of you for being here tonight. Thanks so much. Thanks to all of you who watched and listened. Please do send us your questions for next month's program. You can send those to infocus@indiana.edu. You can also leave a comment or see portions of this show by visiting our website, indianapublicmedia.org/infocus. Next month, we talk about money, specifically how much the state is sending back to local governments and whether errors in determining those numbers have been corrected. Have a nice night.
Production support for In Focus is provided by Hoosier Energy, providing electricity for Central and Southern Indiana electric cooperatives and their member customers. Information at hepn.com, and by viewers like you. Thank you.